For 30 years, this was the sound of the global economy, the hum of machinery, the roar of furnaces, the ceaseless motion of millions of workers, turning raw materials into the products that define our modern world. From the sprawling factory complexes of Shenzhen to the bustling ports of Shanghai, one country became the undisputed engine of global manufacturing. That country was China. For an entire generation, the label "Made in China" wasn't just a sticker on a product. It was a fundamental law of economics. It was the unchallenged center of gravity around which our entire supply chain orbited. Now, there is a new sound, the sound of silence. Empty factory floors, dormant production lines, a quiet that speaks volumes about a historic shift now underway. But this is not the end of the story of manufacturing. It is the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter being written right now in the humming industrial parks of Bac Ninh, Vietnam, in the state-of-the-art automotive plants of Monterrey, Mexico, and in the rising tech hubs of Chennai, India. The great manufacturing empire that once seemed invincible is seeing its foundations crack. And from those cracks, new powers are emerging. In this video, we will not just talk about why companies are leaving China. That is the old story. We will embark on a global journey to discover the new story. We will investigate where these companies are going, why they are choosing these specific new locations, and which nations are rising to become the world's new factories. This is the story of the great realignment of the 21st century, and it is happening right now. The Great Exodus. Why now? This massive shift, this corporate exodus from China, is not the result of a single event. It is the culmination of a perfect storm. Three powerful shocks to the global system, happening in rapid succession, that shattered the old assumptions and forced a radical rethinking of how the world does business. The first of these was the trade war shock. For years, the deal was simple. Companies moved production to China to take advantage of low labor costs, and in return, they gained frictionless access to the massive American consumer market. Then, beginning in 2018, that fundamental equation was broken. The United States imposed tariffs, often as high as 25%, on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods. For many businesses, this was not an inconvenience. It was an existential threat. Consider a product that costs $80 to make in China and sells for $100 in the US. The company has a $20 profit margin. A 25% tariff on the $80 cost is an extra $20 tax. Just like that, the entire profit margin is erased. Suddenly, the China price was no longer an advantage. It was a liability. But the tariffs did something even more profound than just change the math. They introduced a new terrifying variable into every boardroom calculation: political risk. Chief executives and boards of directors realized for the first time that their entire supply chain, the lifeblood of their company, could be held hostage in a geopolitical conflict between two superpowers. The stable, predictable world of global trade they had built their businesses on was gone. It was replaced by uncertainty. This forced a fundamental question. Is it safe to have all of our eggs in one basket? The answer, as it turned out, was a resounding no. And just as companies began to grapple with this new political reality, the second shockwave hit: the pandemic shock. In early 2020, the world witnessed the unthinkable. The engine of global manufacturing sputtered and stalled. China's strict lockdown policies shut down factories, closed ports, and severed the logistical arteries that connected it to the rest of the world. For companies in the West, it was a moment of terrifying clarity. Automakers in Germany couldn't get essential electronic components. Medical suppliers in the United States couldn't get personal protective equipment. Tech giants in Silicon Valley couldn't get the chips needed for their products. The fragility of the system was laid bare. The pandemic exposed a fatal flaw in the just-in-time manufacturing philosophy that had dominated for decades. It proved that relying on a single country, no matter how efficient, for the majority of the world's goods was a catastrophic risk. The corporate mindset shifted almost overnight, from a focus on efficiency to a focus on resilience. The new mantra became diversification, de-risking. Never again, executives vowed, would they be so vulnerable. And as the world began to emerge from the pandemic, the third and perhaps most enduring shock became clear: the cost shock. For decades, China's primary competitive advantage was its seemingly limitless supply of low-cost labor. But that era is over. The story of rising costs in China goes far beyond simple wages, which have been increasing for years. It is a story of a nation that has fundamentally changed. The cost of industrial land in coastal manufacturing hubs has skyrocketed. The Chinese government, facing its own environmental crises, has imposed increasingly strict and costly environmental regulations. And most importantly, the workforce itself has changed. A new generation of Chinese workers, better educated and with higher aspirations, no longer wants the grueling, low-paying factory jobs that their parents' generation relied on. This has created labor shortages and driven wages even higher. When you combine the political risk of the trade war, the supply chain vulnerability revealed by the pandemic, and the undeniable reality of rising costs, the conclusion for thousands of companies became inescapable. It was time to leave. The question was no longer if they should move, but where they should go. And that question is now being answered, creating a new map of global manufacturing. The new champions enter the ring. Our first stop on this journey is a nation that has quietly and then very suddenly transformed itself into a global electronics powerhouse: Vietnam. For a prime example, look no further than the world's most valuable company, Apple. For years, the iPhone was the ultimate symbol of the designed in California, assembled in China model. But quietly, Apple began to diversify. First, it was the assembly of AirPods. Then production of the Apple Watch and MacBook models began to shift to the industrial parks surrounding Hanoi. Apple's move was a signal to the entire industry. It was a vote of confidence in Vietnam's capabilities. And they were not alone. Samsung, Apple's chief rival, went even further. They invested tens of billions of dollars, building massive factory complexes that now produce the majority of their smartphones for the global market. Today, Samsung is Vietnam's single largest foreign investor, and its exports account for a significant portion of the country's GDP. So, what is Vietnam's secret sauce? How did this nation of 100 million people position itself to win the race for high-tech manufacturing? The first advantage is its people. Vietnam has a young, dynamic, and highly literate population. Its workforce is known for its dexterity and strong work ethic, making it ideal for the complex task of assembling modern electronics. And crucially, its labor costs remain significantly lower than in China. The second advantage is geography. Vietnam shares a border with China. This allows companies to pursue a China plus one strategy. It means they can move final assembly to Vietnam to avoid tariffs and lower costs, while still sourcing many of the necessary components from their established suppliers just across the border in southern China. It's a strategy of diversification, not complete abandonment. The third advantage is policy. The Vietnamese government has been relentless and incredibly effective in courting foreign investment. They have streamlined regulations, offered attractive tax incentives, and aggressively pursued free trade agreements, like the landmark EVFTA with the European Union, giving goods made in Vietnam preferential access to markets around the world. The evidence of this success is in the numbers. According to Vietnam's Ministry of Planning and Investment, registered foreign direct investment, or FDI, in the first 9 months of 2025 reached a remarkable $28.54 billion. This represents a more than 15% increase compared to the same period last year, a clear sign that the investment wave is not slowing down, it's accelerating. Provinces like Bac Ninh have become symbols of this transformation, turning from quiet agricultural areas into bustling hubs of global technology. However, this rapid growth comes with significant challenges. The country's infrastructure is now straining to keep up. In recent years, severe power shortages have hit northern Vietnam during the hot summer months, forcing factories to halt production and threatening to undermine the country's reputation for reliability. The national power grid is in a desperate race to expand capacity to meet the soaring demand from new industrial parks. Furthermore, its logistics network is facing bottlenecks. Ports are becoming congested, and roads are often gridlocked, increasing the time and cost of moving goods. And while the China plus one strategy is an advantage, it is also a vulnerability. Vietnam remains heavily dependent on China for raw materials and components, meaning any disruption across the border can still bring its factories to a standstill. Vietnam's rise is undeniable, but its journey to becoming a true manufacturing titan is just beginning. And while Vietnam is capturing the electronics market, a different giant is rising right on America's doorstep, focused on cars and heavy machinery. In our next video, we'll explore exactly how Mexico is winning the critical nearshoring race. To make sure you don't miss that deep dive, subscribe now and hit the bell. The nearshoring powerhouse, Mexico. Our second stop takes us to the industrial heartland of northern Mexico, a region that is experiencing an unprecedented investment boom. The story here is not about moving production across the ocean. It's about moving it across the border. This trend is called nearshoring, and Mexico is its undisputed champion. The most visible symbol of this boom is Tesla's decision to build a new gigafactory in Monterrey. But Tesla is just the tip of the iceberg. A wave of companies, particularly in the automotive and heavy industrial sectors, are pouring billions of dollars into Mexico. Companies like BMW, General Motors, and Ford are expanding their already massive operations there. Countless smaller suppliers that make everything from car seats to wiring harnesses are following suit, creating entire ecosystems of manufacturing. What is driving this gold rush to America's southern neighbor? Mexico's first and most powerful advantage can be seen on a map: location. In a world of fractured supply chains, proximity is the new king. Goods manufactured in Mexico do not need to spend weeks on a container ship crossing the Pacific. They can be loaded onto a truck or a train and cross the U.S. border in a matter of hours, not weeks. This drastically reduces shipping times and costs, and it allows for a level of integration with U.S. factories that is impossible for any Asian country to match. The second advantage is the USMCA, the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. This trade deal, which replaced NAFTA, creates a stable and largely tariff-free trade zone in North America. It gives companies operating in Mexico preferential access to the U.S. market, a powerful shield against the uncertainties of the U.S.-China trade war. The third advantage is experience. Mexico is not a newcomer to manufacturing. For decades, it has been a major hub for the automotive industry, building a deep base of skilled labor, experienced engineers, and established supplier networks. Companies moving to Mexico are not starting from scratch. They are tapping into a mature and sophisticated industrial ecosystem. The economic data confirms this tectonic shift. In 2023, for the first time in over 2 decades, Mexico surpassed China to become the #1 trading partner of the United States. The market for electronics manufacturing services, or EMS, in Mexico is projected to explode, growing from $53.2 billion in 2025 to an estimated $97.4 billion by 2031, according to industry analysts. But like Vietnam, Mexico's path is not without serious obstacles. The most significant challenge is security. Organized crime remains a powerful force in many parts of the country, and cargo theft is a major concern for businesses. The risk of having trucks hijacked or trains robbed adds a significant security cost and logistical complexity to operating in the region. Another pressing challenge is infrastructure. The rapid industrial growth in northern states is putting immense strain on the local power grids and water supplies. Companies planning new factories are now facing serious questions about whether there will be enough reliable electricity and sufficient water to support their operations in the long term. While the Made in Mexico label is becoming more powerful than ever, the country must overcome these deep-seated challenges to fully realize its potential as the premier nearshoring destination for North America. The awakening giant, India. Our final destination takes us to a nation whose potential is, in a word, colossal. A country of 1.4 billion people that is finally beginning to awaken its dormant manufacturing might. India. For decades, India was known as the world's back office, a powerhouse in software and IT services. Manufacturing was its Achilles heel. But that is starting to change. driven by a deliberate national strategy and powerful geopolitical tailwinds. The most prominent success story, once again, involves Apple. Just a few years ago, the number of iPhones produced in India was a statistical rounding error. Today, it is a core part of Apple's global strategy. According to the Times of India, exports of iPhones from India reached a record-breaking $10 billion in just the first 6 months of the 2025 fiscal year. The total value of iPhones produced in the country for the full fiscal year is expected to hit $22 billion, with a staggering 80% of that, or $17.5 billion worth, destined for export. This is not a small experiment. This is a massive shift, with some analysts predicting that India could be producing 25% of all iPhones globally by 2027. But India's ambition extends far beyond electronics. It is already known as the pharmacy of the world, being the largest provider of generic drugs globally, and it is making a concerted push into chemicals, automotive components, and other advanced manufacturing sectors. What are the unique advantages that India brings to the table? Number one is scale. India's massive domestic market is an irresistible magnet for global companies. Businesses are setting up factories in India not just to export, but to sell to a rapidly growing middle class of hundreds of millions of people. It's a strategy of make in India, and for the world. The second advantage is its political system and demographics. As the world's largest democracy, India is seen by many Western nations as a more stable and ideologically aligned long-term partner compared to China. Furthermore, its population is young and growing, a stark contrast to China's rapidly aging society. This demographic dividend promises a vast workforce for decades to come. The third advantage is a proactive government policy encapsulated in the Make in India initiative. The Indian government has implemented policies like the Production-Linked Incentive, or PLI scheme, which effectively subsidizes the cost of setting up manufacturing operations in key sectors, directly encouraging companies like Apple and its suppliers to invest. However, the path for this awakening giant is fraught with challenges. The most notorious of these is bureaucracy, often called red tape. Navigating India's complex web of regulations, permits, and tax laws can be a daunting and time-consuming process for foreign companies. Despite recent improvements, it remains a significant hurdle compared to the more streamlined, top-down system in China. The second major challenge is infrastructure. While India has been investing heavily in new highways, ports, and airports, the quality and connectivity of its logistics network still lags significantly behind China. The cost of power is high, and the reliability of the grid can be inconsistent. Finally, while India has a massive workforce, there is a shortage of workers with the specific high-level skills needed for advanced manufacturing, requiring significant investment in training and vocational education. India's potential is immense, but unlocking it will require overcoming these long-standing structural challenges. The New World Map. So after our journey across 3 continents, what can we conclude? The great corporate exodus from China is not the story of a single successor. There is no next China. The era of a single dominant world's factory is over. Instead, what we are witnessing is the birth of a new world map for manufacturing. A map that is more decentralized, more specialized, and ultimately more resilient. We are moving from a unipolar manufacturing world to a multipolar one. Vietnam is emerging as the nimble and focused champion of electronics assembly, leveraging its skilled workforce and strategic location. Mexico is cementing its role as the indispensable nearshoring powerhouse for North America. Built on the unbeatable advantages of proximity and free trade, and India is the awakening giant whose sheer scale and demographic might make it a long-term contender for manufacturing supremacy. The single massive engine of global production that was China is being replaced by a network of smaller, more specialized engines, each with its own unique strengths and its own unique challenges. This new map presents opportunities for these rising nations, but also new complexities and risks for global companies. The world is in the midst of a profound and irreversible shift, one that will reshape the flow of trade, investment, and power for the rest of the 21st century. We have analyzed Vietnam, Mexico, and India. Now, I want to hear your perspective. In your opinion, which of these countries has the best long-term potential to become a true economic superpower, and why? Is it Vietnam's focus, Mexico's location, or India's scale? Share your thoughts in the comments below.